Hi, my name is Chen. I'm an associate professor of finance in the business school. Here I'm going to talk about corporate climate mitigation policies. So original idea of this actually is a combination of two studies. Of these two studies came from my personal experience. Back in 2013, I witnessed many extreme weather events such as hurricanes, tornadoes, winter storms. So that made me more convinced about anthropogenic climate change. So I asked the question, if I'm more convinced about climate change after experiencing these events, perhaps managers will be subject to similar process. And if that's true, that might be reflected in their corporate actions. So that's the original idea. Three questions. One, how do I capture managers' exposure to the weather events? So in these two studies, I used the headquarter counties, the weather events that are incurred in the headquarter counties to capture those their exposure. And and second question is, so specifically, I use the annual frequency of the extreme weather events that are incurred in a headquarter county and the local temperature to capture the exposure. And the second question is, because I'm trying to capture the climate change, so maybe the change in the frequency, the change in the temperature matters more than the level. So that considers the fact that at different regions, they may be subject to different extreme weather events. For example, California historically has suffered more from wildfires than other states, and southern areas are naturally warmer than northern areas. So we need to change. And the third question is, warming may feel very differently depending on which month the warming occurs, right? In July, a hotter July may feel much worse than a hotter January. So that, I'm considering those three questions when I take on these studies. And because of the time, I'm just trying to look at the results. So this shows the relationship between extreme weather events and climate ratings. So in these papers, in these studies, I'm using the ratings from the third party of corporate climate mitigation actions to capture their degree of friendliness of their climate actions. So this first model and the second model, the difference is whether I control for the county fixed effects. And so you can see that after controlling the fixed effects, it becomes positive and significant. So that's saying that it is the change in the exposure to the extreme weather events rather than the level that matters for the climate ratings. And the last model here shows the more recent exposure has a more pronounced impact on the climate ratings than the more distant exposure. So that's the extreme weather events. And going into the temperature, here I'm looking at first the average annual temperature is not significant, but when I go to the January versus July temperature, you can see that July temperature began to show significance, but it's weekly. And then the third model, when I further detrend these two temperature variables, July temperature becomes much more significant, and January temperature becomes to show negative, even though it's not significant. And last model shows similar results as the last model in the extreme weather events, which shows that more recent exposure to the temperatures has a more pronounced impact on the climate ratings than more distant exposure. So conclusion, whether are these results good or bad, I think it's mixed. On the good side, these results show that because most of the climate models predict more frequent extreme weather events and natural hotter weather, so these results show that more and more firms will begin to take actions because of their personal exposure. But on the downside, as you can see that from these models too, the sample period, even during the sample period, the extreme weather events show a flat pattern for the time trend, right? So it doesn't increase. And the time trend is from that, the time period is from 1997 to 2009. And for the weather, for the temperature, the January temperature actually increases more than the July temperature. But so my results show that the January temperature is not significantly associated with the climate regions, but July temperature is. So that says that there's quite uncertainty because the intermediate path leading to the most disastrous impact of climate change is uncertain. So I think that's the bad side about this, what the results suggest. Thank you.